stepdaughter destroys a hotel room because I won't buy her a car, but now she blames us for not being able to go to college. What I'm about to share has me feeling quite conflicted and even questioning whether I've made the right decisions, so I'd like to get a more objective perspective. I've been married to my husband for 4 years, and although our marriage has generally been good, there is one major aspect of my life that has always been complicated: my relationship with his daughter from a previous marriage. To give a bit of context, my husband has 2 children, an 18-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. As for me, I have an 8-year-old son from my own previous marriage. My relationship with my stepchildren has been, for the most part, good, although that's relative. With his son, things have been pretty smooth. He's a good kid, very calm, and gets along well with my son. I think they have a bond because they share interests like video games and sports. Also, the smaller age gap between them makes it easier for them to have a good relationship. However, with my stepdaughter, the story is completely different. Since I first met her, our relationship has been difficult. I wouldn't say she's a bad person, at least, not until what recently happened, but she has behaviors that really frustrate me. She's spoiled, and I think part of that is due to her mother. She constantly asks for things, and although sometimes her father buys them for her, he can't always fulfill all her whims. When it's something worthwhile, he'll do it, but if it's just a whim, then no. What bothers me most is that her mother, on the other hand, does indulge her. It seems like her mother wants to give her everything, or at least that's the impression I get. The good thing is that my stepson has never complained about his mother treating him differently. I don't want to give the impression that I have some sort of rivalry with her mother, because I really don't. Our relationship is cordial at best, though quite distant. We basically limit our interactions to saying hello when she comes to pick up the kids, and that's it. We've never had a deep conversation, neither good nor bad, until recently. A month ago, my stepdaughter was accepted into a university, which was a cause for celebration for all of us. It's not one of the most expensive universities in the country, but it's not cheap either, and both parents had agreed to help her with the tuition. In this arrangement, my husband would pay more since he earns more money than his ex-wife. Everything seemed fine, but then a new issue came up. My stepdaughter decided she needed a car when she moved to university. Her argument was that she would need it living in another city, but also to visit her parents. This was her way of trying to soften them into buying it for her. Her mother was the first to say no. She didn't have the money to do it, as all her savings were allocated to paying for the university. My husband also refused, but not just because of the money. 3 weeks ago, he lent his car to his daughter, and she crashed it. It wasn't a serious accident, but the car had to be repaired, and he was without it for a week. Since that incident, my husband doesn't think buying her a car is a good idea. However, my stepdaughter is stubborn, and when both her father and mother said no, she decided that I should be the one to buy her the car. This is where things get even more complicated. As I mentioned earlier, we've never had a good relationship. It's not that she treats me badly directly, but there has always been a distance between us. She barely talks to me, and when she does, it's only to ask for something, like in this case. I made it clear from the start that I couldn't buy her a car, even if I wanted to. It's not like she's asking for a new sweater. It's a car that costs thousands of dollars. I don't have that kind of money available. The little I have saved is for helping my son if he decides to go to college someday, and the rest is in my retirement account, which I can't touch right now. The funny thing is, my stepdaughter knows about that money because she probably overheard me talking about it during dinner, and she started demanding that I use it to buy her the car, arguing that I could save more later. Both her father and I told her to stop insisting, but she wouldn't accept it. Her father told her that if she wanted a car, she could work and buy one herself, but she said she didn't want to get a job because these were her last months with her high school friends, and she wanted to enjoy them, not work to save money. Up until that point, the most annoying thing was her insistence, but then things got much worse during a family trip we had planned. The trip had been planned for months. We already had the tickets, and the idea was to spend a few days relaxing as a family. My husband, our children, and I were going. But from the moment we boarded the plane, my stepdaughter started sabotaging the vacation. She didn't do it before because she knew we could still leave her behind, but once the plane took off, she began with her pressure tactics. First, she asked me again to buy her a car when we returned. When I told her no again, she started kicking the seat in front of her, which was mine. I asked her to stop, and so did her father, but she only paused for a while before bothering me again, this time by throwing trash at me. Her father scolded her, and another passenger even reprimanded her, but she just laughed. When we arrived at the hotel, we decided enough was enough and grounded her. While the rest of the family went out to dinner, she had to stay in the room. However, instead of accepting her punishment, she decided to order room service, which resulted in a considerable bill. Her father scolded her again when he saw the dishes and told her she couldn't continue behaving this way. The second day was relatively calm, but on the third day, she caused problems again. She pushed my son into the pool when it was already nighttime and cold. We weren't in the middle of playing, we were getting ready to go to dinner. We had to go back to the room for my son to change clothes, and once again, my stepdaughter was grounded and prohibited from ordering more room service. My husband even told the hotel staff not to accept any room service orders from her. Despite everything, we managed to enjoy a few more peaceful days, but on the last day of the trip, she did something that topped everything and ended up involving the police. To understand what happened, I should explain that we had booked 2 rooms, one for my husband, my son, and me, and another for my stepdaughter and her brother. What she did was completely destroy her room. It started when she threw a chair out the window. Luckily, it only landed on the balcony, but it could have caused a serious accident if the window hadn't had a balcony. Then, she destroyed the television, throwing it to the floor and smashing it to pieces. Lastly, she raided the minibar, throwing all the bottles and food around the room, staining the walls, and even damaging the minibar itself. We found out because her brother came running, scared. He tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen and kept on with her destructive tantrum. By the time we got there, the hotel staff were already present and the police had been called. She was smiling, as if this were some kind of prank, but it wasn't. So, we let the police take her away, thinking that spending a night in jail might teach her a lesson. Her plan, as she later revealed, was that if we didn't buy her the car, at least we'd have to spend the money repairing the hotel damages. My husband and I were furious. Not only because she had ruined our vacation, but because the damages amounted to more than $7,000, and it would all be charged to my husband's credit card, as he had paid for the rooms. We decided we had had enough. My husband decided not to pay for her university, and instead, he would use that money to cover the hotel damages. If she decides to attend college, she'll have to figure out how to pay for it herself. What happened the next day was perhaps the most controversial part. My stepdaughter was still in custody, but our return flight was scheduled for the morning, so my husband and I decided to leave without her, along with our children. My husband called his ex-wife and told her that if she wanted to help their daughter, she would have to take a flight and pick her up, because he wasn't going to do it. I know many will say that we were cruel to leave her in a different city, but we were so exhausted by her behavior that we couldn't take it anymore. She's 18, an adult, and it's time for her to start facing the consequences of her actions. My husband was still very angry the day after we got back from the trip, so he did something that might make us look like the bad guys. He decided to call the university and tell them what had happened. He informed them about her arrest and all the damage she had caused, hoping they would revoke her admission. I know many will think this was too much, but after everything she's done, both her father and I believe it's for the best. She doesn't deserve that opportunity after what she did. We still don't know what decision the university will make, but my husband is determined not to finance anything for her. So, are we the bad guys for leaving her in another city and for informing the university about what she did? I know my husband and I are fed up with her, but I can't help wondering if we made the right decision, because this could certainly ruin her future. Update 1. I've been reading all the comments and as expected, opinions are quite divided. Some people believe my husband and I were cruel for notifying the university, claiming that we've ruined a young woman's future, while others think we did the right thing, that she completely deserves it. I'm glad to see that many people agree that her behavior has been completely disproportionate and absurd. Destroying a hotel room just because we didn't buy her a car is the action of someone completely disconnected from reality. As for the decision to leave her in another city, the majority of you agreed it wasn't wrong. After all, she's 18, legally an adult, and should be capable of handling the consequences of her actions. We had no obligation to do more for her, and that's the truth. Now, for what has happened since I posted the initial story, my stepdaughter has returned. She came back thanks to her mother, who went to pick her up a few days after we left. This, as you can imagine, has caused even more tension in our relationship with her. Additionally, my husband told her that he had spoken to her university and to her mother, This was the worst thing he could have done because it will ruin their daughter's future. She also said that all of this could have been avoided if we had just bought her the damn car in the first place. Seriously, at what point does it become our obligation to spend thousands of dollars on something that isn't even a real necessity? The worst part is that she had the chance to buy her the car too and also said no. So why are we the ones responsible for fulfilling her daughter's whims? This kind of attitude from her mother is exactly what has created the monster that my stepdaughter is today. She's allowed her to act like a spoiled child without any serious consequences for her behavior, and now it's clear she's still defending that dynamic. When my husband told her we had contacted the university, her ex practically exploded. She said we were heartless, that we had destroyed everything her daughter had worked for, and that we had taken away her future over one mistake. I can't understand how anyone could consider destroying a hotel room a simple mistake. It's not a mistake. It's a series of conscious and malicious decisions meant to cause damage, with the hope that there would be no consequences for her. Obviously, we don't care too much about what her mother thinks. We're tired of this situation and no longer feel we have the responsibility to raise a young woman who shows no desire to improve or learn from her mistakes. The most important thing is that my stepdaughter will now live with her mother full-time, which, honestly, has been a relief. She no longer has to split her time between her father's and mother's homes, and that means she's no longer our responsibility. If her mother wants to continue raising a daughter who doesn't understand that actions have consequences, then she can live with her. Update 2. I'm back after 3 weeks to share what has happened, and let me tell you, things got pretty intense yesterday. After all this time without contact with my stepdaughter, she finally came by to pick up some of her things, but also because she wanted to talk to my husband. What we didn't expect was the amount of drama that conversation would bring. When she arrived, the first thing I noticed was that she was much quieter than usual. She wasn't the loud, defiant girl we were used to. She just went straight to her room and started packing the things she needed. She didn't say a word or make eye contact with either of us, which, to be honest, I found pretty odd. My husband and I sat in the living room, watching her silently as she went back and forth with her belongings. Once she was done packing, she came into the living room. That's when the real drama began. She stood in front of my husband and suddenly broke down. She started crying, something she had never done in front of us before. Through her sobs, she said it wasn't fair that she was losing her chance to go to college because of what had happened and that she hadn't expected things to escalate this far. She admitted that things got out of control, but you could tell she still didn't fully grasp the magnitude of her actions. My husband listened, but didn't seem as moved as he might have been before. I think he was just emotionally drained after everything that had happened. When she finished talking, he asked her a very direct question. What did you expect would happen when you destroyed a hotel room? She was silent, unsure of how to respond. That's when my husband answered for her. He told her that she expected to punish us for not buying her the car. She expected that we would just pay for the damages, continue paying for her college, and, on top of that, eventually buy her the car she wanted. My husband even added a bit of sarcasm, asking with a smile, "And what color did you want the car to be?" Surprisingly, she caught the irony and didn't answer the question. For the first time in a long time, she seemed to lower her guard a little. She said she was willing to make things right and wanted to fix what she had done. My husband responded by saying that if she was truly willing to make amends, she could start by working to pay back the money for the damages she caused at the hotel. He even offered to make a call to the university to see if there was any possibility of them reconsidering their decision to revoke her admission. Although, to be honest, we're not sure if that's even possible at this point. But, of course, this would only happen if she committed to taking responsibility for what she had done. However, this is where things got complicated again. My stepdaughter quickly said that there wasn't enough time for that. Classes were set to start in just a few months, and according to her, there was no way the university would take her back in such a short time. To which my husband, in a very serious tone, replied, "And that's exactly why people think before they act." I think that was one of the most tense moments in the conversation. She had no response because she knew her father was right. After that, she stayed for a little while longer, crying without saying much else. Then she left the house, and we haven't heard from her since. Although we haven't had direct contact with her, we did receive a call from her mother later that same day. Apparently, my stepdaughter had told her what had happened at our house, and her mother insisted that my husband should call the university anyway. Her reasoning was that sooner or later, their daughter would pay him back the money. But my husband told her he didn't believe that was going to happen. In fact, he made it clear that if she truly believed her daughter would pay back the money, then she could be the one to cover the hotel damages, and her daughter could repay her later. Of course, her mother's response was predictable. She didn't have that kind of money available. What's interesting is that when my husband suggested she use the money she had saved for college to pay for the damages, her mother refused. She said that money was specifically for college and couldn't be used for anything else. My husband, with a sarcastic tone, responded, "Well, since she's not going to use it for college anymore, maybe you can buy her the car she wanted." That's when his ex lost her patience and hung up on him. We weren't surprised by her reaction. It's clear where my stepdaughter gets her narcissistic behavior from. It's easier to blame us than to accept that her daughter has been out of control for years. The saddest part of all this is that if my stepdaughter doesn't change her ways, the future waiting for her isn't a bright one. She's going to suffer a lot in life if she continues thinking she can manipulate and control everyone to get what she wants. Life doesn't work that way. She needs to learn these lessons on her own, no matter how hard they are. Update 3. This is the time when my stepdaughter should be starting her first semester at college. However, instead of enjoying her new college life, she's fulfilling a court-ordered community service sentence. In the end, she doesn't have to do it in the city where she caused the damage, which is a bit of luck for her. She's serving her punishment here, close to home. Although, judging by her attitude, I highly doubt she feels lucky. My husband and I, on the other hand, think this could be a good opportunity for her to learn a lesson. Things could have been much worse, and she has the chance to realize that her actions have consequences. Of course, whether she learns from this is entirely up to her. If she does, something positive could come out of all this. But it's also very possible that she won't learn anything and will waste this opportunity. I'll confess something that many of you might find cruel, and I know it wasn't my finest moment, but at the time it felt so good that I couldn't hold back. The other day, on my way home from work, I saw a group picking up trash along the side of the road. Among them, I recognized my stepdaughter, in her reflective vest, bending down to pick up garbage from the roadside. I couldn't resist the temptation. I drove closer, and when I was near enough, I rolled down the window and said with a smile, "It's so comfortable driving your own car, and without anyone kicking the back of your seat." I won't lie, for a brief moment, I considered throwing trash at her the same way she did to me during that flight where all this chaos began, but I decided against it. That would have been too much. The thought crossed my mind, but I held back. She just stood there silently, staring at me, without saying a word. I know it was immature on my part, but after everything we've been through, I couldn't help myself. Since then, there hasn't been much more contact between us. As for my husband's ex, well, she's still unhappy with the whole situation. She only talks to my husband when absolutely necessary, and always in relation to their other son, but most of the time she continues to blame him for ruining their daughter's future. She keeps repeating the same argument. If he hadn't informed the university about the arrest and the damage, their daughter could be in college right now. However, it's clear to us that my stepdaughter ruined her own future with her behavior. What frustrates us the most is that instead of trying to help her daughter understand the seriousness of her actions and supporting us in the difficult task of teaching her responsibility, her mother keeps making excuses to justify what she did. She must be constantly feeding her daughter ideas that it was us who put her in this situation, and that's why her life is the way it is now. She might try the same thing with their son, but at least he witnessed everything that happened and is mature enough to understand that what his sister did was wrong. So we believe that even if she tries, it won't have the same effect. He's grown up differently, and as a result, he doesn't have the same behavior as his sister. Update 4. I'll start by saying that my stepdaughter has finished her community service, but as many of you predicted, she hasn't learned a single lesson from any of this. I knew it was unlikely something positive would come from this situation, but there's always a bit of hope, right? Unfortunately, it seems that was in vain because instead of reflecting, she has continued her destructive behavior. Before I dive into what's happened now, I want to clarify something about the joke I made last time. Yes, I know it wasn't the most mature thing to do, but to compare me to my stepdaughter and say I'm just as bad for making a sarcastic comment is a huge exaggeration. You can't compare a simple remark to trashing a hotel room and causing thousands of dollars in damages. So, to those who are comparing me to her, I'll say, that's just as delusional as my stepdaughter. But anyway, those comments probably come from people with the same lack of self-awareness as my stepdaughter. Now, back to the main issue. What my stepdaughter has done this time is beyond anything we could have expected. Apparently, she's developed a new taste for destruction, which is already a serious problem. But the worst part is that this time, we aren't the ones who have to pay for the damages. What started as a night of partying ended in another disaster. It all began a week ago on a Thursday night. My stepdaughter decided to go to the woods with a group of friends to have a bonfire and, of course, drink. What was already a bad idea quickly turned into a series of poor decisions. At some point during the night, they decided it would be a great idea to break into a nearby cabin, a private property, mind you. What followed was complete chaos. From what we've heard, they broke into the cabin, smashed windows, destroyed furniture and objects, drank inside like it was their own space, and to top it all off, someone, and we don't know if it was my stepdaughter or one of her friends, decided to use the kitchen as a toilet. I'm not sure how anyone can reach that level of disrespect and disregard for someone else's property, but there you have it. The worst part is that this isn't just a case of vandalism or reckless teenage behavior. This falls into the realm of trespassing, breaking and entering, and of course, vandalism. The police are involved again, as expected. The owner of the cabin has pressed charges, and although my stepdaughter and her friends have tried to downplay what they did, the evidence is too obvious to ignore. We spoke to my stepdaughter's mother, and, as expected, she's devastated. This time, she couldn't deny it or try to blame my husband or me. However, she's still not showing the firmness that's needed for her daughter to finally understand the consequences of her actions. Instead of confronting her seriously, her mother continues to look for excuses and quick fixes to get her out of this mess, as always. As for us, we're not lifting a single finger to help her. Her mother should do the same, but that's not our problem anymore. Update 5. I know many of you have been asking for updates about my stepdaughter, but I've been waiting until I had something more concrete to share, rather than just telling you we were waiting for the sentencing. Well, now I can tell you that the resolution has finally come out, and my stepdaughter, along with her friends, is going to spend time in prison. In her case, it will be 3 years. I don't have all the details about her friends, but from what I've heard, their sentences are similar. As you can imagine, my husband is not happy about this. No parent wants to see their child end up in this situation, but it's something he can no longer do anything about. From the beginning, he tried to set boundaries and teach her responsibility, but her mother always did the opposite, and that has ended up having severe consequences. Although it's been a constant battle, this is a situation we never wanted, but has now become inevitable. I've seen some comments on previous updates suggesting that my husband was partially to blame for giving in to some of her whims, so I want to clarify that. It's not like she asked for something, and he ran to buy it immediately. That wasn't the case. My husband only agreed to reasonable requests, like money for clothes when she genuinely needed them, or for going out with her friends on special occasions. The problem has always been her more extravagant demands, which he rarely fulfilled unless it was for a special occasion like a birthday. On the other hand, her mother almost always gave in to whatever her daughter asked for, as long as it was within her budget. That dynamic went on for years, and it's what exploded when neither her mother nor her father were willing to buy her the car she desperately wanted. This wasn't just about a new phone or makeup anymore, it was something far more expensive and out of line. People can always say that as parents, we could have done more. We're not perfect, but it's really hard to raise a child when the parents aren't aligned on how to parent them. In my case, with my ex-husband, we've always agreed that if we needed to make a big purchase for our son, we'd at least consult each other. That's been our rule, and so far, it's worked well. But I know not all marriages end on such civil terms. This situation has been a harsh lesson for both my stepdaughter and her mother. I don't know if my stepdaughter will learn anything from this experience, but maybe her mother will. Hopefully, at least, her younger son still has a chance to learn from all of this and won't end up on the same path as his sister.